You're listening to Remotely We Are One, a podcast to help inspire others to take their lives back from the office commute. I'm Rick, a passionate beer rep who loves the industry but hates the commute.
And I'm Kaleem, a remote work advocate and consultant. We're going to speak with some of the top professionals who have managed to avoid the commute as they share stories from the most inspiring to the most comical, all while working remotely.
Man, this sounds exciting. Let's clock in. Oh, wow. Nice board collection you got there.
Yeah, thank you.
Are those all different makes or are they from the same manufacturer?
No, all different.
Yeah,
some are boards I used to ride way back
Yeah,
in
no
the
kidding.
day. Some are custom boards I created. Others are just boards I like. Some are boards
Yeah.
from November. So yeah, a little bit of a medley here.
Were you a Gleaming the Cube guy or?
I was more of a Search for Animal Chin guy, I would say. Appreciated Gleaming the Cube just because, it was the first mainstream skate movie right around my age. But yeah, then Bones Brigade came out and, that was, you can't go wrong with Tony Hawk and crew.
Oh my God. No question about that. I was a rad guy. I was a BMX dude. So
I remember Rad. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had the cassette tape on my hip as I was cruising around on my BMX bike.
Oh, you're one of the faithful, huh?
I mean, I remember back in the day.
Yeah. Welcome back, everyone, to Remotely We Are One. I'm your host, Rick Haney, joined by my esteemed colleague, Kaleem Clarkson. Hey, man.
What's going on, man? What's going on, baby?
Oh, I'm excited.
I'm gonna do this whole episode in my Snoop Doggy verse.
Not enough O's and smooth, y'all. Not enough O's and smooth. So, hey, everyone out there, since you know how to find us now, do us a huge favor. Go to ratethispodcast.com/remotely one and leave us a review. That would be awesome. Again, ratethispodcast.com/remotely one. If you could do that for us, that would be a miracle.
Really?
Yeah, oh yeah. I will say, since 2015, Remotely One is one of the largest communities of remote work professionals with over 2,500 Slack members and 4,000 email subscribers.
There we go.
Yeah, man, it's free to join, so go check it out at remotely1.com. And with that out of the way, Kaleem, give us a tease or two about today's guest.
Okay, Rick, I told you yesterday I was all nerved up because this dude, he's just a cool dude, number one. But like when you look at his resume, it makes you more and more nervous. But I mean, I get nervous every guest, but like this one, I'm sweating a little bit. But
I've already changed my shirt twice.
Hey, I'm wearing one of those shirts that have like these pads in your armpits that prevent the sweat from coming up. And I also have, for people that aren't viewing this, I put on my Walter Payton special edition jersey just for our guest today.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's nice and shiny.
Where's our guest currently residing? Guest, where are you residing?
The mysterious guest is based in Northern Virginia, United States.
Ooh, the East Coast.
He's on the East Coast. They on the East Coast. They're a contributing writer for Fast Company since 2017, right? So we're just going to start with that little baby one.
That's a home run in itself.
Right. He used to be the Senior Director of Talent Acquisition at, you ready for this? NPR.
Ooh.
Just a little tiny radio station people might have heard of. Something that most people don't know about our guest, he was once a trapeze performer. And guest, what was the move that you performed? What was the move, guest? Do you remember? Is it a Backend Hocks Off?
That is correct. You guessed correctly the performance that was made at the show.
Yes, this is the best game show I've ever played in my whole life. Here we go. This guest also was the Vice President of Human Resources for this little baby, tiny music entertainment company. You want to guess, Rick? They're small. They're not very big at all. They're tiny. Probably never heard of them.
No, I was it Ticketmaster?
Ooh, good guess. Live Nation. I wasn't
that far off.
Yeah, did you hear that? The Vice President of Human Resources at Live Nation. So many questions, Wonder who did you meet? Did you meet Jay-Z? Did you meet Prince? I mean, who did you meet? I mean, I just gotta know. Last but not least, he is the founder of Amplify, which is an HR executive search firm and also HR learning and leadership development. Listeners and viewers, please give a warm welcome to Lars Schmidt.
All right.
Come on,
Lars.
Yeah, this guy sounds amazing, right?
Yeah.
I was torn if I could I hold on to the announcer voice the whole time. I wasn't sure. I had to let it go for a second.
Lars Schmidt, come on down.
Take that on the podcast. Take that.
Yeah.
Bitch.
Yeah, and I do have to throw down one correction. Ticketmaster was actually the correct answer.
That's why I said it.
I left just after Ticketmaster was acquired by Live Nation in that merger. So I am Ticketmaster ride or die, Live Nation.
I'm so glad you called that out because I knew technically I was correct. Thank you so much for throwing that out there.
You know what? I had a person once tell me, Kaleem, you're not an asshole. You just love to be proven wrong. And you know what? I applaud that.
Damn.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
There's nothing like starting a podcast by correcting the co-host. So we're right on target.
We're going to get learnt today, Kaleem. I'll tell you that much. We're going to get learnt.
Don't mind it, but
Yeah, don't mind it. So since we're on the subject of Live Nation, I got to preface this with just a tiny little skosh of a backstory here. As Kaleem mentioned, we're from the same town. And when we were growing up, there wasn't a whole lot going on. I mean, the funnest thing to do was watching the tumbleweeds blow across the street on a Saturday night. You know, there was one traffic light, you know, just kidding. It wasn't that bad. But anyway, the town is very different now. And a large part of that is because Live Nation, in cooperation with several area businesses, built this amphitheater on the riverfront. And now the town that we grew up in, bored as hell, is now like a major music destination. And
yeah, that's true.
As a musician myself, it fascinates me to see how live music can transform a place from something to completely something else. What was it like being able to see something like that on a regular basis? Like, were you ever part of that kind of planning, or what was it like working for Live Nation?
And Ticketmaster.
Ticketmaster,
Yeah.
that we've officially corrected both.
Come on,
so I'm
right? I mean, you were here when he said you were correct, dog.
No, look, I mean, looking back, man, Ticketmaster is probably the most fun I've ever had in a job. I spent, almost 7 years there. I think I had 8 different jobs during that time. Kind of came in as a junior recruiter, left being groomed to take over for the CPO. Met, mentors, friends, people that I'm still in touch with. We really assembled a pretty incredible team there who've all gone on to do big things. It was interesting. Like, the question I always got when I worked there was like, oh, that must be amazing. Like, you go to all the concerts. So the thing about the model with Ticketmaster doesn't own any of the tickets. Ticketmaster is the intermediary. Live Nation, on the other hand, like, if I could have said yes to that, I probably would have seen a shitload of concerts for free. At Ticketmaster, like, because we were the intermediary, we rarely got, free. Occasionally I got hooked up. I don't like I never did, but I think most people assume you work there and you're just going to whatever show you want. That wasn't my world. I knew some people on the music side, that was their world, and I was envious of it. But yeah, I saw a few shows, but definitely not the extent that I think most people would assume.
Yeah.
I'm just a music fanatic. I had to ask.
Yeah.
So first you go there. Let's go through your career a little bit on this journey. So can we back up? So where did you kind of start off at? Because I want to ask you about the NPR question. So can you just give us the quick chronological, like how it went from where did it start and then like where did it progress up to?
Yeah, I went to college, grew up in South Florida, went to college at Florida State, knew I wanted to move to LA. We had one company come on campus that had an office in LA for a career fair, and they happened to be a technical recruiting agency. Didn't know anything about that, but I was like, it'll get me to LA. So I interviewed, got the job. They moved me to New York for 6 months for training, and then moved me out to their Santa Monica office during the .com 1.0 kind of heydays. So I did technical recruiting on the agency side for the first 3 years of my career. The bubble burst. Fortunately, I went over to a client, came in as employee number 5 to kind of ramp them up for an acquisition. And so did that. And then from there, I went over to Ticketmaster.
Super cool. So what was the NPR life like? So you leave Ticketmaster and then you go to NPR. So what was that like? I mean, they are a nonprofit, so
Yeah.
a little different type of funding model, but I'm sure it just had a different purpose. So like, what was different in that role, I guess? Like, what was your main purpose there? And like, what was different about working for that entity?
I mean, it was kind of like almost the polar opposite in a lot of ways of Ticketmaster. It's a job I almost didn't take, right? So I was, had kind of worked my way up to VP at Ticketmaster. The original job I was hired into at NPR was a director level. It was a pretty significant pay cut. And, I remember talking to my wife about this, and I'm just like, God, I don't know. Like, this is a big step back professionally. It's a big step back money wise. And she's like, it is, but like, where do you see yourself going? And like, may this open doors to what might be next. And, she's smart. I married up and she challenged me to really.
She's a good lady.
Yeah, very good. And so the job I almost turned down, I ended up going for, and it changed my career. I think primarily it was like, I was used to, big global team, big budget, big resources. Now I'm in a nonprofit, no budget, no resources, next to no team. And I was tasked with leading the digital transformation of NPR. So my role was head of talent acquisition and innovation. So in that role, I was really tasked with like finding ways for NPR to compete on two fronts, right? On the journalism front, where we're recruiting against New York Times, Washington Post, all these for-profit media organizations, and this new digital side where we're recruiting against all the FANGs and everybody else. And like, that was a huge task. I realized that a traditional talent strategy and recruiting strategy that I was used to, what did me no good there. So I'm like, okay, what do we have? Like, we've got a great consumer brand. We've got a great kind of loyal fan base. We have really digital savvy reporters and journalists and people in these different roles. And this was the early days of really kind of the digital and social version of employer brand. And so I kind of went away. I was like, look, we're not going to win if we try to do this on an even basis. We have to do it differently. And so we went all in on employer brand is our strategy. And it paid huge dividends. We created one of the first culture hashtags with NPR Life. Twitter became our number 4 source of hire back in the day. And it was amazing. But that really kind of set me on what then became an entrepreneurial path that was never in my cards prior to that role. But that role unlocked so much for me. And I had, I wasn't, lots of people, they use the term a lot, backseat listeners or, people that are just grew up on NPR. I wasn't one of those people. I have deep respect for their journalism and their storytelling, but I wasn't like a rabid NPR fan when I got there. So I was somewhat dispassionate about like not coming in as a fanboy, coming in as somebody like, hey, we do great work. Let's elevate it. Let's find the right people to move this forward. And it was an incredible run. So yeah, I did that for 3 years before leaving to start my own firm.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, you've obviously done a lot of stuff. You've seen some shit. You've met with some people, right? You've learned a lot over the years.
A few folks, met with a few folks. Seen some shit.
And you just briefly touched on it, but I'm hoping to get more of an expanded answer from you on this. How did the culmination of all of those things lead to Amplify?
Yeah.
I had an opportunity. So what was kind of cool about the role at NPR, that like, and innovation piece covered a lot of ground and allowed me to get involved in a lot of projects that were outside of traditional recruiting and even HR. And one of them was this initiative called Generation Listen that my friend Daniel Diebler founded. It was an effort to kind of connect NPR with younger listeners. So we created this incredible advisory board of, 20-something founders who had exits and just, amazing entrepreneurs. And right around this time, like I started doing more speaking, I started doing more writing. I started being immersed more with entrepreneurs, both within the HR space and then also in kind of tech and these other sectors. And that, for the first time, kind of got me thinking, hey, maybe I can do this. Maybe I can build something. And I think, prior to that, I never wanted to be out on my own. Like I always wanted a 9 to 5. I wanted something reliable. I wanted to be able to go home and be done. And then I realized like, I've got a BlackBerry on my hip. Like I'm never going to go home and just be done. Like that's not the world of work that I'm going to experience. So I'm like, well, if I'm in that environment, why not maybe see what I can build on my own? So we kind of did that. At the time, I actually had an offer to run global talent for SoundCloud in Berlin. And my wife and I were thinking about doing that. Yeah, that would have been a fun gig. But we were kind of like, we were trying to start a family. We're like, are we really going to move to Berlin and like start a family there and be so far away? And so we're like, okay, no, we're going to turn that down. But I was like, at that point, NPR had moved from build to maintenance, and maintenance is not my thing. So I was like, well, I need to do something new. And if we want to kind of grow roots here and try to start a family, I can start my own firm and work with companies anywhere in the world. And we can remain based here for family reasons, but I can build a business and work with, companies in London or, Australia or California, wherever it might be. And that's kind of how Amplify came to be.
Wow. So
Great.
I'm just trying to get in Lars' head, and basically you're just hanging out, and then all of a sudden, wait, I can do this for other people because you're at NPR. So listeners, viewers, hear this. Nonprofit work is great. I once started a nonprofit myself. I thought I was called Conscious for Charity. We were going to book concerts all over the country, which we did, and thought that was going to be my whole thing. And when you work for a nonprofit, you said something very interesting of you have to be able to create impact without finances, without budget.
Yeah.
And you really figure out like, what is it that people are passionate about? So why do people work at nonprofits when we all know that, the salaries aren't the same? Hell, you even did it yourself, Lars. So it's just kind of interesting to hear you say, wow, I'm here, I'm doing this, I'm noticing some entrepreneurs having these problems and I can help them. So shit, why don't I just create something?
Yeah. It's funny, like when I look at my own path, I heap loads of credit and praise on NPR and that environment for like setting me on the path. And one of the things that, because it is that, and you're exactly right with like the constraints often found in nonprofit, if I wanted to do something, I had to figure out how to do it myself. If I wanted to create a video, I had to teach myself how to edit video. If I wanted to create an audio job description and experiment there, I had to teach myself audio, right? Because our production team and digital team didn't have the bandwidth and resources to help. And so like it created this scrappiness and this over-indexed MacGyver gene that allowed me to just go and build. And I'm like not a very patient person. So if I'm like, I want to do this, I want to do it now. I don't want to do it like 4 months when they can fit me in on the roadmap. And I'll never forget, I don't remember exactly what the tool was, but I think it was my last year there in 2010. We moved into a new headquarters, which is a gorgeous building. And I'm like, this is recruiting gold. Like we need to show this off. And I was like, can we get a video of the, video tour? And they're like, yeah, in like 4 months. I was like, that's not going to do it. And I forget the name of the tool, but it was a tool kind of similar to how like Reels on Instagram works right now. So you could like stitch together videos and overlay, music. And so I was like, I'm going to use this. And I did like, again, I shot it on my iPhone, walking around, shot the footage. And then you can pick the soundtrack. And I picked Foster the People, Pump Up. No, I picked Black Eyed Keys, Gold on the Ceiling. And I shared it from the NPR Jobs account. It went viral. It was blowing up. And I was like, wow. Yeah, like, look at this cool thing I just created. And I get a call from the head of NPR Music. And I like, idiot me. I'm like, she's calling to congratulate me on this cool thing that I created. She's like, hey, I saw your video. And I was like,
it's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm psyched like, right now too.
Yeah. She's like, yeah, it's really great. By the way, do you have the release from the Black Eyed Keys to use their music in that? I was like, Black Eyed. Yeah, I was like, no, do I? She's like, we're gonna get sued if you don't take that down. I was like, great. So I had like, in a frantic, I'm DMing, like I look up the founder of the company, I'm DMing him on Twitter, and he was like, hey, we really loved your video. I'm like, that's great. You have to change the song immediately.
That's hilarious. So, I never put my feet on Eddie Murphy's couch. Hell yeah, I put my feet on Eddie Murphy's couch.
He fixed it fortunately, but yeah, that was right. So there's pros and cons to moving fast and being scrappy, and I owe a lot of it. The first 7 seasons of my podcast I published myself. Like I edited, I did all of that myself until I moved to video, and I realized that I had nowhere near the talent necessary to do that effectively.
That is amazing. So I got to ask you. So you build up, you start working on Amplify, and you're starting to do this. I mean, honestly. The question is, how in the hell, and I put it in there like that, I spelt it, hell. How in the hell did you get Adam Grant to write you a testimonial? You know what I mean? Like, how did you get Adam to write you a testimony? I didn't even notice that before, and I've connected with you for a while, and I just was doing research, and I scrolled down. I was like, this dude got Adam on there, give him a testimonial. So tell me how that happened, and how at me, Adam. You know what I mean? Like, what's up?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a huge Adam Grant fanboy and have been for years. And so I think, it's really one of those things you kind of shoot your shot. And as I was working on the book and I was thinking about my dream endorsers.
And what's the book, Lars? Real quick.
The book, Redefining HR.
Well done.
Amazing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I knew I needed to get, some cover quotes and testimonials. And so I knew somebody who was the CEO of an HR tech company who he was an advisor for. And I just said, hey, huge fan, would you be open to making introductions? No expectations whatsoever. And he did. And Adam was incredibly gracious. And yeah, I'll never forget that. I mean, it was just, I think having somebody who's kind of like, whose mind is a hero to me. I just love the way he thinks about the world of work. Having his stamp on the book was just it was amazing. Yeah, so I'll forever be grateful for that.
Congratulations, bro.
Hey, since we're on that subject of HR, I want to talk a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, HR and people operations. Okay, I know that they're kind of one and the same, but they're different, and so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and also maybe shine a light a little bit on like how far you were into your career when you realized you wanted to do one or the other.
Yeah, it's interesting. The field of HR, like HR has been HR for years. And I think that there are different schools of thoughts, right? There are some people who use people operations as a substitute for HR. Right? It encompasses everything, but they call it people ops or people operations, not HR. There are others who view people operations as a subset within HR. There are others who don't really use either, and they use the term talent and culture to describe the term. There are others who use human capital, which I mock. You shouldn't use that. That's terrible. But some people do that. Yeah. And so, it's interesting. Like, I think it depends on your view on that. Like, I think HR as a term for the field is obviously the most commonly understood. Like when I publish Redefining HR, a lot of people just based on the title, they're like, oh, so you're saying like we should call ourselves something else. I'm like, I don't really give a shit what you call the function. I'm talking about how you think about your work, how you think about the impact, how you think about the role, how you think about, building equity inside of your practices, how you think about balancing the constituents of your employees and the business, right? How you think about bringing business acumen into the field of HR. There's so many components that make up what modern HR and progressive HR is that I try to outline in the book, but it was really more about that mindset than the title. And I think what's interesting is, my podcast has been redefining. So when the book came out, originally my podcast was called 21st Century HR. When the book came out, I rebranded it to Redefining HR just to make it easy. This upcoming season in January, I'm rebranding it again to Redefining Work. And I'm doing that very consciously because I think that it's not about it. It's not even about HR. Like it's about like when you talk about factors that are influencing this new world of work, obviously HR plays a big role in that, but it's not limited to HR. And I want to broaden the conversations to actually speak with more, CEOs and other kind of stakeholders who are pivotal in kind of driving whatever comes next for the new world of work. They don't necessarily sit in what we traditionally think of as HR.
Wow, what a great answer. So he answered, that's called a block and bridge, Rick. You know what I mean? He did that very well. I mean, he didn't like, he's like, look, I'm not going to do that. Okay. But it makes sense. It really does. It does make sense, Lars.
You answered it so well that I don't even have a retort. I don't have a follow-up. I got nothing. I'm like, okay.
I was waiting for the, well, allow me to retort, but
yeah. I love the fact I saw when you sent out the message that you were changing it, and I feel like sometimes they feel like the culture's the people ops or the HR department's responsibility.
Yeah.
And how we work and then at the same time, it's traditionally been like, well, that's your responsibility, but like you're not at the table, you're the HR person and we'll get to you eventually. Yeah, like I think it was a great idea. I think it was a great idea making that transition. So seeming that this is our first episode of 2023, by the way. I just want to know, where are you seeing, so I feel like the pandemic has done obviously a lot of tragic things for society, but it's also opened our eyes to a lot of things. And I would say that workplace flexibility is top of mind to all humans as far as autonomy, being able to work when I want, where I want, and maybe even how I want. So kind of shifting your experience towards the remote workspace and everyone really having more experience with because of the pandemic. Where are you seeing, I don't want to say the future of work heading because I'm sick of saying FOW, but where are you kind of seeing this remote work thing heading? You know, we started with the pandemic of everybody loves it. Then school, online school, and people getting tired of it. Oh my gosh, no. And then, you know, there were ups and downs over the past 3 years. You know, you're starting to see the forced return to office.
Yeah.
All of those things, Lars. Where are you seeing us head?
Yeah. I mean, like, I think we first have to kind of acknowledge that, like, pandemic remote work wasn't remote work, right? That was survival. Like, I'm a teacher for my kids. Like, I'm trying to work. I'm trying to, like, not catch a virus that might kill me, right? It's like, you know, that we were forced to make that work under, like, the worst possible conditions. And so, like, I kind of discount that in some ways, is like, because it wasn't designed, it wasn't optimized, it wasn't intentional, right? It was all reactive and survival. Now we're a few years later, right? And I think companies have been able to be more thoughtful about their practices, whether it's fully distributed, whether it's hybrid, what hybrid looks like. I mean, there's so many different layers to hybrid, and there's so many different ways to design that intentionally or not, right? That impact the employee experience, particularly for remote employees. And so I think, you know, the conversation about, like, remote or not, to me is kind of boring at this stage, just because I think, like, we've moved on. Like, remote is here to stay, like, period. There will be different flavors of it. And obviously there'll be companies that want to embrace hardcore, you know, work philosophies and get people to sleep in their office. But there'll be a lot of companies that are going to be fully distributed or hybrid. And so I think, to me, it's like, you keyed on the main point, choice, right? If you're somebody who wants to move to Costa Rica and do remote work for your entire career, you're going to have lots of opportunities to do that. If you're somebody who, you know, likes to be able to tap into that office vibe, you know, that IRL connection from time to time, you can do that. And if you're somebody who's like, no, I need separation, I want to be in an office, you can do that. And so I think that is the benefit for everybody. That's kind of the future. It's really a choice. Companies have to make decisions of what's going to be the best for their business based on all of the unique nuances that make their business, you know, a business of one. But the days of, like, does remote work or should remote, like, that's done. Like, yes, it should exist. It will exist. It will exist long into the future.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. I love that. Thank you, man. That was a good one. I like that.
So to kind of further that conversation a little bit, how much pressure have people ops and HR seen from the shift to remote work? Are there any specific difficulties that you've noted since more and more people are going remote?
We important now, right, Lars? We important now. The one thing I will say is, like, you know, there's a seat at the table now, isn't there?
Oh man, well, it's not that we are now; they're just seeing it. You know, so some people have blinders on for too long. But
sure.
Yeah, look, I think a couple things here. I mean, one is, like, really being thoughtful, intentional around synchronous versus asynchronous work, right? And I think in the early days after the pandemic, all these in-office companies just ported everything to quote unquote remote, like, still way too many meetings, you know, all the workflows were based on in-office workflows. And so that sucked, right? That was a big time drain. You're sitting on Zooms all the time. It was, like, soul killing. I think they're getting better about actually thinking, like, well, does this have to be a meeting? And do all these people need to be in this meeting? Or do we get better about meeting hygiene, like having agendas up front, having more structure to the meeting, as opposed to everybody just sitting around like, okay, who's leading this? So I think really kind of optimizing and being more thoughtful and deliberate about the time you have together live, whether it's, you know, physically live or live via video conference. I think that piece is definitely one. I think also another big element, and we've made some progress here now, but is really supporting managers in how to manage remote employees, right? Because for many people, they had always worked in an office. They had always seen their employees. They'd always had their one-on-ones live. Now they're not, or maybe they are in some cases and they're not in other cases. And they're also having to, support and manage employees through global pandemic, geopolitical conflict, war, erosion of reproductive rights, social justice initiatives. I mean, it's just like one thing after another, these big humanity, toxic political environments, things our employees are experiencing. And managers have to, they need HR support in being able to do that effectively and adapt to all these things, particularly when they're overseeing remote populations that maybe they don't have a lot of experience with.
To me, when I think about the shift and the pressure that was put on HR and people ops at the beginning of the pandemic, and now with the challenges of these forced return to office policies that aren't really kind of backed by a lot, we're just stuck in a hard place if you're in a corporate, because the data that we all know is there as HR professionals. So actually, here, as I'm just blabbering, I got a question. With this forced return to office, what are your thoughts for those professionals that have to give those reasons? Or what do you truly believe the reasons are for some of these forced return to office, just based on like what you're hearing in conversations? Like, because the director of HR at XYZ company knows all of the research that we all know as far as productivity.
Yeah.
So now I have to send out a message that says, oh yes, we're all coming back into the office. I just want you to kind of comment on those weird moments and then those conversations.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it comes down to control, right? The perception of control, not even necessarily actual control, but the perception of control. I think, again, we're hardwired to have this kind of butts and seats mentality around productivity, is that these things can't, we've disproven that over the last couple of years, but it's still, for whatever reason, embedded in our legacy, minds that, that has to happen live and you have to meet in person. And absolutely, there are certain things, aspects of a company to business, and especially creative roles where that live connection does really matter. And I think that can be hampered by remote work. But I think for other kind of core roles, it's about control. It's about wanting to see people, have them, feeling like they will surely be more productive if they're here, which we know isn't true for many people. But, I think it comes down to that. And some of these companies, maybe it's a way to get ahead of having to do another round of layoffs where you make these requirements and some people are going to self-select out. Maybe you can kind of correct your budget, that way. Like, I don't know. I want to don't claim to get inside the mind of a CEO. I think ultimately control is probably the biggest thing. And then perhaps holding on to maybe some myths of what the workplace was for and how it had to be the central focus of an organization's culture.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that sometimes ties into ego as well. I mean, you get a guy that is just a control freak because he can be, and he can get away with saying, it's just always been this way. This is how it's done. Don't question. I'm your manager, So
can you get me that report by the end of the day, please?
That would be great.
Yep. Okay, here we go. So, okay, this is my favorite part of the show, Lars. I'm geeked up about this. Thank you so much for the time that you've already given us, some real deep thoughts on the industry. And now it's almost time for Rick's question, but I just remembered something, how we originally connected. Are you purposely adding hip hop lyrics and dope ass lyrics to your post? Because I just noticed back in the day, viewers, listeners, how I connected with Lars is I've always been following him. He's always posted great content. But one day he posted something and he was like, blah, blah, blah. And it's just the cult of personality. And blah, 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 blah. And I was like, I was like, did he mean to throw in a living color lyric there? And then I
hope so.
And then I mentioned it. He's like, I love living color. So then another thing, I can't remember what the next one was, but you had another lyric, and I was like, did you just quote,
I think it was
something?
Biggie on that next one. Yeah.
Right, Biggie. So Has that been a little bit of your style? I mean, you try to throw in some little culture into some of your education. I mean, like what? And he's got, for all the listeners, he's got all these dope ass snowboards in the back as well. You got to take a look at it. So, like, what's your secret, man?
Yeah. Okay. So just because I wouldn't be a great guest if I didn't correct you twice, they're skateboards. So I gotta throw that in there. But yeah, man. As the wind is pulled out of the sail.
Listen, bro, I'm a sporter, not a freaking snowboarder. Okay, these are freaking skateboards.
Clearly,
that is not shade on snowboarders. I just gotta, people are like, well, wait a minute, man, those are tiny snowboards. They're children's snowboards. No, so I think in the work that I do, I mean, really, like when you distill what I do and why I do it, I'm trying to kind of advance the conversations around the world of work and HR and people operations. And I'm trying to do that in my own style in a way that is true to who I am and how I want to show up and how I roll and in an unfiltered way. And so that means that sometimes I'm going to have a post or something to say that I'm going to put a ton of thought into it. It's going to be a very poignant, thoughtful, maybe in some cases emotional post. And there's going to be other things that I want to share where I'm just like, this needs to be fun. We can keep this light. Like, yes, maybe we're going to talk about some heavy topics, but like, we don't have to do it in a clinical way. And so, I'm always like, when I'm writing the newsletter, thinking about subjects, that is something that I think about, like what's going to make, be a little Easter egg or make it just be fun for me to kind of share it. And obviously cool getting feedback like that you're seeing that too.
Challenge, more Easter eggs. Let's see how good you can be, sir. Okay.
Accepted.
All right, Rick, it's your show.
So Lars, you've been around a long time. You've met with a lot of people. You've had a lot of experiences, as we talked about. Throw us an unforgettable moment that you may have had that you couldn't possibly forget while working remotely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm, like a lot of your listeners, I imagine, like I'm an OG at remote work. I think back in 2004, when I was a Ticketmaster, I had my wife got a job. We were living in LA. My wife got a job in DC. And so we were moving and I didn't want to leave Ticketmaster. Like I love the company. I love my team. I love my boss. And so I pitched the idea saying, hey, look, let me move to Virginia. I'll come back 1 week every month. So I have FaceTime with the team in the office, but I'll be based remotely. I'll hire recruiters in Chicago and New York. So I'll have more of a geographically dispersed team. And my boss was amazing. And she was like, yes, like you can pull that off. And so this is, again, 2004, no bandwidth Skype. Issues, what Maybe. They were like, we're not using this tech in 2004. So I'm like, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to buy 2 fancy, webcams. I'm going to put one on my office, one on my computer in my office in LA, one in my home office, here in Virginia. Makes and when sense. I have my one-on-ones with my team, I'll do it over a video conference. It'll feel like I'm right in the room.
Perfect. Makes perfect sense. Perfect sense.
Great plan. Great plan. The thing about technology and bandwidth is it sucked. And, I don't think, I probably tried a dozen of those before we just said, fuck it, and went back to the phone because it just wasn't ready for live video at that point. But it was just, there were so many embarrassing conversations where it's like, some of these were like performance conversations or like other things were like, again, like I'm as a manager, like I want to be really present with you. And it's just like people freezing, chopping up. I don't know if they heard me, like I'm going off on a tangent. And like 3 minutes later, I realized they got none of it. So yeah, that was my early days of, some scars from the, remote work 1.0 days.
Early battle wounds.
Yeah.
Dial up. So at 2004 people, I mean, AOL is just slowly fading, man. That is great.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was bad. I'm still, I probably deep inside, I'm still traumatized if something reprises on something. It was like, oh man. So yeah, luckily, bandwidth issues, much better. Yeah, tech, much better.
We've talked about this before and you just haven't really improved your performance. We're going to move in a direction and we're going to let you just freeze right
that was great. You had me for a minute. I was like, oh, come on. mean, isn't that the biggest fear for remote workers, right? Like losing bandwidth and getting cut, especially in video meetings. Like that's just it's brutal.
How many times do I gotta tell you this? You are, just kind of
They're probably taking pictures of being like frozen with this like ridiculous look on my face. So,
That's right.
Good time.
Awesome. Lars Schmidt, thank you so much for joining us. Where can our listeners find you?
Yes.
So amplifytalent.com. That's the hub for the newsletter, the Amplify Academy, the podcast, everything else. You can find me on Twitter at Lars and LinkedIn at /in/Lars Schmidt.
Awesome, bro. Thank you so much.
Well, I can't thank you enough for taking the time today.
Yes.
Kaleem, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I was first to the punch.
Yes, I'm geeked up. I'm psyched. I can't wait for the episode to come out. It's going to be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, man. It was a blast riff with you guys, and appreciate all you're doing to kind of advance these conversations around remote work.
Yes, no, we appreciate your insight. We'll do this again.
Absolutely.
Thanks. Peace.
You've been listening to the Remotely We Are One podcast. Visit us at remotelyone.com/podcast for upcoming episodes. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and download our episodes on your favorite podcast app.
Hey, don't forget to clock out.